Hi everyone, I'm Kerrin Shea, and today we're talking to senior and multimedia journalism major Nathan Hope as he starts his campaign for Student Assembly. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So first up, what has inspired you to run for Student Assembly?
Gosh, there's a lot to go over, but definitely the sort of thing that really kicked it off in my mind in terms of thinking about possibly wanting to run was the spring budgeting process. For those who don't know, Student Assembly has control over all student organization budgets. So all student organizations submit what they would like in terms of their funding for each different categories, and then the total amount, and then Student Assembly from there has the authority to sort of look at that and then cut what they feel is necessary at each category to meet the total amount of dollars for that student fees pay into. And everyone pays student fees. It's sort of just tacked on to your tuition. But what happened was, first of all, Student Assembly passed a resolution back in early March of this year that limited stipends for student organizations that receive them. So that includes the Equinox, E-Board, WKNH, Film Society, and SAC. And so we didn't hear about that until I think weeks after it had actually passed and it was already in effect. We were updating our constitution anyway at the Equinox to reflect some changes that we were just looking to make, and during that meeting they said, by the way, your constitution says that you have this many stipend classes, that's too many, you have to reduce it. And sort of at that meeting, then we started thinking about the budgeting process coming up, and we sort of knew from the outset that is something that we could not comply with. We have people that join the Equinox E-Board that wouldn't be able to dedicate the amount of time that they dedicate had it not been for the stipends. And it's not a huge amount. It's $750 $1,000 and $1,250 a year, depending on the class for our E-Board. But I was in charge of the finances for the Equinox, and I submitted our budget unchanged in the category of stipends, and I was glad to see that that resolution ended up being repealed in regard to the stipends. But then at the same time, when we got sent the budget numbers in terms of what Assembly had changed for all the other organizations, there was clearly something wrong, and we got those numbers ahead of the meeting, which I believe was the next day at that point. And then what I did is I went out of my way. I sent the numbers for budgets to basically every student org leader that I knew at the time, saying, please come to the Student Assembly meeting tomorrow. Your budget's going to be voted on. There's pretty massive slashes that I could see to certain clubs in particular. And at that next meeting, we saw 20 plus people, 25 plus people come to Assembly. And I'm someone who's covered Assembly before. I've covered KSC Senate before. Almost nobody ever shows up to those meetings, and they are important, and I believe people should show up to them. But it was sort of a different feeling being on the sidelines and feeling so powerless, like, having so many people that, I care about, that I work with as just a student org leader that I know, and seeing them basically like fight for their lives as an org to continue supplying the programming that people want to see on campus. And so I knew at that time that it didn't feel as though the area of campus that I occupy in sort of the media organization space in particular, it didn't feel like we had a voice, and we were just sort of talking to these people that didn't really fully understand where we were coming from. So at that point, I started thinking someone at the Equinox or someone in one of the media organizations in particular that I know, I think someone should run. After asking around, a lot of people that would be great to run are simply too busy. So then I started thinking about maybe I should be the person to do that because it's something I am passionate about. I'm minoring in political science. I feel like I have a good ear to what students need, what they want to see on campus. And so I want to be that person in Assembly.
Yeah, so with that said, what do you see as the biggest issues students are facing, and how do you feel like you will address them in Student Assembly?
There's lots of issues going on in higher ed in particular right now, and we've seen it at Keene State College with the state's attacks on DEI, for example, with the state's budget cuts, creating issues such as, already you're seeing going into the semester, the dining hours have changed, and people aren't exactly the happiest about some of these changes, which are instituted because of the budget cuts at the state level. And what Assembly needs to do, in my opinion, is we need to become more clear advocates for students. We need to set up meetings with our representatives, our state senator, our if we could get a hold of them, U.S. representative, U.S. senator. We need to send letters to them. We need to act on behalf of what we think the students' interests are at these levels of government and let them know that students are paying attention and watching what's going on, because the student voice is being drowned out, I think, across the state. And I feel like, it's sometimes hard to be a student nowadays. It's hard to see so many different levels of government attack, the places that we go to school that we care so much about, that obviously we went here for a reason. We went here to advance our careers. And so I think students want to see people who can relay their concerns in an effective way, and they want to see someone who is visible and that they can trust with, advancing their interests at all levels of government.
So how would you plan to ensure that student voices are heard and their decisions are heard through Student Assembly?
I think there needs to be more outreach. First of all, I think the social media presence, I think Student Assembly should have its own social media channels. I know student government has social media channels and each class does. Student Assembly does not. I think someone on Assembly should be entrusted with creating social media content. I think there should be, at minimum, certain posts. They should post agendas on there. They should post meeting minutes as they come up. They should post what they're voting on, resolutions when they come out. These are the things that I feel like are basically bare minimum in this day and age. People don't go out of their way to go onto OwlNet and look at student government's OwlNet page to download a PDF of their meeting agendas. That's something that's just not happening. And so I think creating more outreach and making sure that people know when the meetings are all the time, know when the committee meetings are, anybody can show up, they're encouraged to have their voice heard. It's not just they can. We need to better make students understand what Assembly does and what it doesn't do. We need to just be that bridge between the students and the higher levels of government above us, because that's what student governance should be about. So I feel like, a lot of these times when people don't show up to the meetings at all and they don't make any public feedback before it's, almost too late, that's where you run into the issues. So I think making it a more open forum and trying to encourage people to come to the meetings and, again, understand what Assembly does, I feel like that's really the first step. And I've, already written resolutions that I plan to bring forth on increasing this transparency, on increasing advocacy and outreach if I'm elected. So I already have a concrete plan on how to do that.
Perfect. And what makes you the right person to represent Keene State students?
I think I've learned a lot during my 3 years, going on 4 now, at Keene State College. I've covered all various aspects of campus. In my role at the Equinox, I've attended different shows in the arts sphere. I've attended, sporting events. I've attended just regular events put on by student orgs. I'm a very active student in that way. I've talked to so many different partners on campus. I've brought light to so many different issues in my reporting, and I feel like a lot of the times, we obviously don't want to be biased in anything that we report, but we do bring to light, these are things that students care about. If a new inspection comes out in the dining commons, people want to see how they did and see, how they can improve. And that's what we do. We do weekly editorials at the Equinox. We publish our collective opinion as a board on certain campus issues. We've done it before with the blue lights when they weren't working. Bring attention to that issue, actually got them fixed once before. And so I think there is plenty of proof that, in my role at the Equinox and sort of what we've been doing, that, we really have an ear to campus. Our tagline is literally the student voice of Keene State College. So I take a lot of pride in that. And I also constantly am talking to other student leaders and just students in general to see, how they're feeling. I have a pretty large group of folks that, I either have a working relationship with or I just have a regular friendship with on campus. So I do, feel very confident in my ability to speak for all areas of campus, and I don't want to be a representative for, just media organizations, or definitely not just the Equinox. I'm representing, I feel, all people if I'm elected. So I'm very confident, not wavering in that.
Yeah. Lastly, what is one specific goal or initiative that you will be supporting and working for if you're elected?
There's a lot of initiatives that I've worked on. I think the main one that I am really intent on creating and seeing it through is I want to create a 12-person student organization commission, which it would be an independent body separate from Assembly, whose chair would serve as a non-voting member on Assembly. So this would create a bridge between the student org community and Assembly. And then that non-voting member would always be at the meetings, and they would always speak the concerns of this commission. And this commission would be tasked with creating a report once at the end of each semester, detailing what they feel like Assembly needs to do in order to better support them. That way there's never any question about lack of transparency. There's never any concerns about Assembly not understanding why certain funding levels may be necessary for certain things. These are all things that would come up in Student Org Commission that they could bring to Assembly in a very clear way. And creating a report, giving a report to Assembly saying this is what we need, that ensures that they will always be heard. It doesn't just make it so, again, it doesn't make it so they just can go. It means that they will go. And I've also break this down. The commission, if it passes, will have 2 different spots for different areas of campus. So for instance, 2 areas for affinity groups, so Black Student Union, KSC Pride, FEMCO. They would have 2 spots where they can nominate themselves, and the commission will be full of all different areas of campus, 2 for club sports, 2 for media organizations, 2 for Greek life. Everyone would be represented. It wouldn't be stacked in any way, and I've structured in a way to make sure that no one's left out of the conversation. So that's the big thing that I'm planning on bringing forth if I'm elected.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's all for today. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kerrin Shea.